So welcome to the Medhurst podcast, guys. This is
morning.
Josh and Ollie, and we're here to discuss the cyber threat landscape in professional services businesses, particularly with regard to the legal sector, I guess. And I suppose it would be a good idea to introduce yourselves first. So maybe, Ollie, if you go first.
Yeah, sure. So, Ollie Bilham, I'm Channel Account Manager for Watchguard, covering the North region. I've had the pleasure of looking after Medhurst for the past 4 years.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
maybe 4 years. Don't feel that long. But yeah, my responsibility is to kind of advocate Watchguard and support my kind of channel partners in the territory, of which Medhurst are one of the very best. So, pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Pay you later.
Yeah.
I'm Josh Bates. Despite how I look, I'm actually a solicitor. I'm putting the professional in professional services. I'm a legal director at a firm called O'Connors that Medhurst actually support. We carry on corporate work, commercial work, insurance and regulatory. And in that regulatory space, that's where I neatly sit as a financial services regulatory lawyer. Insurance, of course, is a massive part of financial services, and I'm a kid raised on the Matrix, so I've always had a special interest in kind of cyber-related things. And so cyber insurance is probably one of the things that I touch on, policy wording advice and looking at mitigation of risk for professional services business in relation to cyber-related risks.
Brilliant. So I guess it would be a good idea to start at the beginning, which is the emergence of the threat landscape, I suppose, over the last 10 years, and really how that affects businesses today where perhaps it didn't previously.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think we've gone from this notion of hackers kind of scattergunning, just going for anything they can get their hands on and trying to make inroads, to now being so much more targeted.
Yeah.
And I think this targeted piece used to be just aimed at enterprises and state-sponsored stuff and the big banks and financial services. And I think we've seen over the past few years that kind of slowly creep down into that SMB mid-market, which is where Watchguard sits. I know it's predominantly where kind of Medhurst sit, and it's the market you look after. And I think that targeted approach has just meant that we had to change kind of our product set and our portfolio to overcome that. Like you say, it's gone from this idea of having a firewall and some basic signature AV, and a lot of SMBs thought, you know what, that's us, we're fine, we've got the golden ticket, we're unhackable. Whereas to now it's like, look, you need real strength in depth.
Yeah.
You need multiple layers. You need management. You need an MSP who's going to advise and support. It needs to be 24/7, because the hackers, they'll come after you, not necessarily to get your intellectual information and to come after your business, but as a route into your customers and a bigger fish. And I think that's what we've seen in some of the larger kind of newsworthy headline attacks. They've gone in through a small company to get into the big bank or to get into the actual target. It's just the whole thing's just become a lot more mature and kind of big business.
So, Josh, what do you see as the sort of key implications of a cybersecurity attack to a legal firm and
Bad, isn't it?
or a professional services
It's just really
company?
bad.
Yeah.
Full stop. Yeah, stop. You've got... Let's deal with the regulatory piece first, because that's probably the simplest.
Yeah.
You've got a legal services regulator to deal with, who may come at the firm or the senior managers and owners, compliance officers of that firm, to say, well, how was this allowed to happen? What systems and controls did you have in place? What risk assessments did you carry out in relation to cyber security? What have you done to identify and mitigate or transfer that risk? You've also got an ICO issue. So if any of the, let's suppose that it's data encryption or exfiltration, there's a big ICO issue if you've got personal data mixed in and among that.
Yeah.
And usually what happens, I understand from sort of speaking to the guys that deal with more of the claims side of things. So there's a couple of there's a forensic IT guy and a forensic accountant I know at Baker Tilly that deal with the claims piece. Is that you're getting now data encryption, and they'll sort of do one layer of ransomware, and then they'll say, actually you got to pay another bit because otherwise we're going to exfiltrate this onto the dark web. And so just when you think you're out of the woods,
double whammy.
Yeah. The car won't start.
Paying the ransom.
Yeah.
Really the right way, is it?
So obviously, you've got an ICO issue, and the fines there can be pretty eye-watering. You're talking percentage of turnover. I can't remember the exact numbers, but or in the millions, depending on the size of the business. And that's not going to look great.
No.
That could probably then follow with satellite claims from data subjects saying, well, you didn't keep my data safe, so I'm now going to sue you for that piece. Reputationally, like I said, it's not great. No one wants to be the law firm that's known for being the one that sort of let cyber attack happen and a load of data go missing in client files. You've got confidentiality issues if any of that data's client information, client confidence. So again, another regulatory headache. It all just becomes this real whirlwind of regulatory trouble.
Yeah.
I think for the business though itself, so talk about the first party risk is the denial of the ability to trade.
Yeah.
So one of the benefits of the cyber policy, here I am trying to sell it right, is the data recovery and restoration piece, and the ability to send in a team, find out the root cause, take some remedial action, fix it, and then get all that data reconstituted so that you can start trading again as soon as possible. Because whilst you might have business interruptions cover, it's usually sort of tricky with law firms, especially where you're talking about WIP, so work in progress that's sort of lodged on a ledger that hasn't actually been actualised, not realised yet. It's not income over actual income. And of course, you'll have a limit to that business interruptions period. So if restoration and getting you back up on your feet takes longer than that, then suddenly you might find yourself, well, actually, the BI loss isn't being paid anymore. I'm not getting any money in, and this whole thing has to fold. And then when it does fold, and if your law firm closes, then you've got to pay run-off premium. So you've got to pay another premium to your insurer to say, hey, I'm closed now. Can you look after everything for 6 years in case something pops up? Yeah, it's not a place you want to be in.
No, and I've certainly heard about a particular firm where they couldn't actually get in the building. So, there's a ransomware attack onto their servers, and that incapacitated the whole door access control system. And CCTV and taking of cash and all these sort of issues that you don't necessarily think about when you think about cyber attacks, do you? But we do know that there are firms that out there that haven't addressed this sort of thing properly because there are reports, aren't there, in the sort of law press and that kind of thing where firms are getting caught out.
I think there's probably myth busting here, a misconception that I'm so small that why would they want to target me?
Yeah.
I've been sort of banging the drum a long time that they're coming after you. It's not just the big, Ollie, to your point, it's not the big FS businesses, not the banks. Or it may be that they might be the end goal, and they're going to go through you, or it might just be you because you've got a client account that's valuable, you've got data that's valuable.
Yeah.
So just don't think that you're not on the radar for bad actors.
Well, I think there's still a scale of like hackers, and they all have the different titles, but there's like low level ones called script kiddies, and they'll just hack you just for the sake of it. That's some 12-year-old sat in their room just going, I'll see who I can get into today, but then.
Reminds me of the film Hackers with Johnny Lee Miller, and that's the kind of person, the anarchist there in their bedroom listening to new metal.
They'll still do that, and that's you're 100% right. It's just that whole piece has gone now. You have to have defences. If you're in any kind of business, you have to have solid perimeter defences. So Al, you're kind of on the front line when it comes to this. So how do you manage this kind of moving, ever-changing threat landscape with your clients kind of on a day-to-day basis?
So what we try to do is follow the Cyber Essentials framework really for clients, because we see that as being a real, good fundamental in terms of a baseline for security. And, we taking them through that process, they don't actually have to take the Cyber Essentials accreditation and get the badge. But really taking them through that process firms up their security internally and some of their processes as well, and make sure that they're operating the right sort of threat protection and software, and also it might nudge them into things that they didn't want to confront. The big one really is admin privileges on people's PCs, which of course malware, once it enters into a network, if it's got admin privileges, it can launch and spread and all the rest of it. It's the keys to the kingdom, exactly. So by shutting that down, which we can do very easily with a very cost-effective piece of software, we're able to then control that admin privilege and stop that threat. And that's one of the big tick boxes really for Cyber Essentials. But Cyber Essentials isn't there as a particularly nasty framework or anything like that. It really is a great benchmark for somebody's cybersecurity health. And actually, if you do get the badge, it then advertises that you are serious about your cyber hygiene and that you've got to that level of standard, if you like.
I feel like the industry's getting to a point where most companies are requiring that Cyber Essentials as like the base level.
Having that badge is obviously important when you're going for certain types of contract. We'll quite often get a customer who'll ring up and say, I'm tendering for a contract, I need Cyber Essentials, how am I shaped?
Can you sell me it?
Exactly, yeah. And actually, for our clients, mostly, it's not too difficult. For our clients particularly, we've taken them through a process whereby we've introduced most of these policies, these software controls, and therefore getting them to that Cyber Essentials level is not a difficult process at all. I think our record is about 24 hours. So, it's easily done. And then obviously we can follow that up with Cyber Essentials Plus as well, which is an audited version of that same thing, and just gives suppliers, customers, that little bit of extra comfort, I suppose. And so I guess the last 10 years can be described as a real change in the sophistication of threats that we're having to face as an industry and how we protect ourselves against that. And one of those things is obviously the different levels of threat protection that an organisation may have, from firewall to endpoint protection, two-factor authentication, for instance, and how those products layer together to create additional security.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I mentioned this previously, but I think it was like 10 years ago where the industry, certainly on cyber, was you had layers, but they were dotted layers. So you had a firewall with vendor A sat here, you had a web filter with vendor B sat there, an email filter here, an AV vendor, all with different providers, because it was seen if someone can get into one of those vendors through the back door, if they're covering your entire estate, then there's this big risk. And I think over the past few years, we've kind of moved away from that as an industry, certainly Watchguard have, to saying, no, there isn't actually risk in that. And actually by putting these kind of products centrally and managed centrally, it makes it easier for MSPs to manage, makes it easier for our customers to manage. And if it's easier to manage and understand, then you're going to get the most out of the product. Yeah. So I think we've had this shift, certainly at Watchguard, over the last certainly 7 or 8 years to bring in this management centrally, bringing our firewalls together, our Wi-Fi, our MFA, and our endpoint product, and having it in one place that's easy to manage and administer, get the reports from, and get the intelligence from. Yeah. And it's having that intelligence that then allows you to make informed decisions, both as a customer and for you guys as an MSP or an MSSP, to make those decisions and kind of offer that best service to your customers.
I think also the way that the products can depend on each other. So you might have a situation where a network is set up so that your end users are VPNing into that firewall, and then the firewall is interrogating that endpoint for some kind of protection from Watchguard, EPDR being one of them, endpoint protection, and I guess combining those two things together, ticking both boxes makes that a far more secure connection than one that is just relying on a VPN, for instance. So
100%, and it's that cross-platform intelligence, isn't it? It's we've spotted something on this endpoint, then we need to be able to quarantine it, and also we need to see what's happened, and you get the diagnostics, and you can do something via the firewall to cut off that network connection and fully quarantine it. That kind of flexibility we didn't have 10 years ago.
No.
Watchguard's in a really good spot now in terms of its offering, but yeah, we've had to go on that journey as the threat landscape has evolved and adapted, and we've had to kind of have a product set that counteracts that and defends as best we can. So then we don't need Josh on the insurance side to get us out of jail if something does happen.
So Ollie, talk about the sort of the emergence of these threats over the years. Watchguard have been at the heart of that. Can you tell us a little bit about how that company has grown and
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we were one of the first firewall manufacturers based out of Seattle. Made red boxes, as we still do today, which you'll see a lot of on a daily basis, weekly basis. Done in red because the first customer was the Seattle Fire Brigade, so it was done in their shade of red. So there's some background for you. We've had to evolve. I think I touched on that earlier, as the landscape has. So we started off with what we called kind of next-gen firewalls. We then kind of transitioned that to UTM, Unified Threat Management. So we were layering more services on. And then in more recent years, we've kind of grown the portfolio to add secure Wi-Fi. So we at Watchguard see that the airspace Wi-Fi, people will connect to anything. We've all done it. I mean, I did it in the Hilton last night. I didn't even check. I just, free Wi-Fi, get me on it. We're trying to do something around that with the offering there. I think it was recently, shortly after I joined Watchguard, we added MFA, so a company called Orthpoint, was formed out of an acquisition from a Brazilian company called DataBlink. So we added that kind of enhancement to 2FA. Yeah. So the ability, so two-factor authentication used to be kind of the dongle in the pocket, right? It was inputting a username and password and then checking a token and inputting a code to get you access to a system. We kind of advanced on that now. So we have soft tokens on mobile phones. Yeah. And we do something slightly differently. So we take the DNA of the mobile device so it can't be cloned.
Yeah.
And then obviously add geographic and timestamps to that. So just it's getting away from that notion that a username and password can be stolen. It's kind of contextualizing it so that your username, password, and an exact replica of your phone can't all be stolen and give you access and keys to the kingdom, as we touched on before. Yeah. And then more recently, we obviously keep upgrading the firewall hardware. We're layering on now these managed services. So we've got managed detection and response, which we'll talk about shortly. We've just added NDR, which is another great acronym, which is network detection and response. So that's kind of taking feeds from switches and cloud resources and looking at the traffic kind of going east to west, not just what's coming through the firewall. It was a bit of a hole for us. Yeah. We've added that to the portfolio. We've got everything now managed in Watchguard Cloud. So honestly, from the days when you joined, what were you selling, the XTM boxes maybe when you first
definitely,
joined? Yeah. The transition's just been crazy from where we were then to where we are now. The portfolio works well together. It's managed easily. It's easy to consume. It's easy to for customers to manage, for MSPs to understand and manage. And I think Watchguard as a vendor is in a really good place now, but it's been some journey.
So I guess we've gone sort of full circle here, really, isn't it? Where we started was that, a lot of these threats were being directed at enterprise, maybe government type level businesses and organisations, whereas now very much the target is to anybody. And that might be, as you say, a route in to a larger organisation, or it may just be.
But I think it's targeted to anybody.
Yeah.
It's not just this crazy scattergun. I'll push this bit of malware out and see what it gets. It's I want to go after Joe Blogs Limited down the road, and I'm going to do reconnaissance on Joe Blogs Limited. I'm going to find out who works there, what they do, where they have their coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
And I will build a profile of Joe Blogs Limited, and I'll find a way in. Apologies to Joe Blogs Limited if that exists. I've just put you on the map. But yeah, it's so targeted now.
I think even if it's not you, so it won't be me, but it might be someone in your supply chain. So there's like big supply chain risk with this kind of stuff that, again, people don't think about. People do their due diligence in supply chain contracts for other stuff, the tangible kind of thing. Have they done their cyber DD on the vendors that they're using or the suppliers that they're using for other things? And if you have, just understanding, right, well, what can I do, if anything? If it's a larger organisation, let's use a cloud. If it's AWS backed, you're not really going to, unless you're a big player, you're not going to change that contract much, and it's not really going to help you. Mm-hmm. I mean, ChatGPT is probably the biggest one. So even if you're an unpaid user of that, you don't pay for the subscription, their liability is limited in California to the value of the contract you have with them. So if you're using it for free, they have no liability. Which probably in the English courts wouldn't hold up, but try and go and sue them in California and see how far you get. It's about fostering a good culture within a business that's cyber hygienic, cyber aware, because you can have all the systems and the controls in place, but usually in the majority of the case it's a people issue. Someone's clicked the link or open the attachment in the phishing email. I think that's still the most prevalent cause.
It is,
of ransomware malware. Because people are busy. They know how to target you, and they'll target you with the right looking thing. And some emails look really bloody convincing. I had one the other day that was so it was an Adobe. If you actually open the sort of the email address, you could tell that it was Blag. But the guy's name was there. He was an actual partner in this law firm. Right. They had the full tombstone of email signature with SRA numbers in, purported to be from another law firm. It's always with property stuff, isn't it? So that was the tell for me. It's like, I'm not a property lawyer, so why are you sending me property stuff all through? So I emailed the guy and said, look, here's this. We deleted it, but they are getting really convincing. So I can see why people, when you're hurried, little click, and then suddenly things go wrong. Well, maybe not straight away. They sort of get in there, then they're sitting, is my understanding, and it might not be that day, but
that is it. They are sat there dormant, watching, probing, seeing from that landing point where they can go. And again, that's where your defences hopefully do their job, and they don't allow them to move laterally, but most of the time there's an opportunity at some point, and then they're into the wider network, and that's when we see the headline stuff where all sorts goes wrong. So it is, you're absolutely right.
And I guess that's where that cyber awareness training comes in, doesn't it? Where, just to try and educate your staff and make sure that they're all thinking cyber first, I suppose, which is a horrible thing to say, really, and it's not a world that we want to live in that kind of very suspicious world, but unfortunately it is the one that we live in now, and I think we've got to get on with it, and part of that cyber awareness training, certainly for clients of ours, is really important that we keep testing that. We keep doing simulated attacks just to ensure that people are aware of what these sort of things can look like, and train them when they fall foul of it.
It's building operational resilience, isn't it? So if a cyber event does happen, how are you going to communicate it to people if you can't use your email?
Well,
think about things that you have to go old school. I mean, some people, haven't really thought about that. If everything goes down, how do you communicate to everyone? Actually, stop using the systems if they're still sort of in them, or what we've got to do. So, professional services firms, but especially law firms in particular, have a regulatory obligation to think about these material risks to their business. It's written in our code of conduct.
Yeah.
And that's very much on the managers of the business and the compliance officers. So they have to allow that to waterfall down to the rest of the staff. And I wouldn't just say fee earning staff; it's everyone within the business.
Yeah.
To be really, really cyber literate. I think.
Yeah.
Cyber literacy, I think, is a big problem. And dare I say, it's a generational thing.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
No. You have to kind of want your staff to be quite sceptical.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Look into these emails. We're all busy. We don't have enough time, but you do need to spend a minute or two just looking at something like, am I expecting it from this guy? Have I had anything from him before? Does it actually make sense? Is it relevant, like you said, with the property stuff. And make a decision? There is a Watchguard tool, actually, DNS Watch, which I think is crazily underused in our portfolio. But the thing I like about that is if a user clicks on a link and we see that it's malicious, we have the pop-up saying, look, you clicked on a malicious site. But then we have like a live training video.
Yeah.
So it's straight away once the user's clicked on the link to say, look, come and do this 5 minutes refresher on kind of phishing links and what you need to look out for and what the gotchas. And so Al, we at Watchguard have recently changed our kind of company tagline. So we want to be the security provider for MSPs, because we've noticed that MSPs and MSSPs, managed security providers, have kind of had a major shift over the timeline that we've been talking about, the last 7 or 8 years as the threat landscape has changed. Have you noticed kind of a change in what's required of you as an MSP and the role?
100%. I mean, when we started this business in 2005, it was me, an engineer, and a van. And we were selling IT support contracts with no real way of supporting anybody remotely. So dash into site in vans, drop of the hat, really unstable hardware and software. In fact, not quite sure why we went into it in the first place. But
a good mistake.
A good mistake.
Yeah.
Because now, highly proactive service. Everything that we do is delivered with an agent on the endpoint, alongside obviously all of the cybersecurity software that we install as well. So, it's massively changed. And you're right in that where we were once a business where we were being looked at for, my PC's broken or my printer's broken, I can't get to the server. Email, when it worked, was very fragile. Now it's that what we're being asked to look after is significant. And the security side of the business, we took a very early approach to that, really. We've been a Watchguard partner, as you know, for over 15 years. And we did that because we saw how powerful those firewalls were compared to other firewalls on the market, and where security fitted into a client's business. And so even then we were security aware, even though we were just probably establishing VPNs between sites and things like that, very sort of elementary stuff compared to now. But so our service and the service that we provide to our clients, largely driven through Cyber Essentials, and what's required through that, has definitely made us a far more proactive business in terms of believing in prevention rather than cure, making sure that we don't have to have difficult conversations with people. I always used to keep me awake at night when we were talking about backups, because we were saying, that tape, put it in, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? And testing, as we've sort of mentioned before, about testing that resilience and that backup. So that was the thing that kept me awake at night. Now, cybersecurity now has to, and cyber threat landscape has to sit alongside that in terms of the seriousness and the effect that it can have on a business. And therefore the partnership with Watchguard and what we do with Watchguard has always been incredibly important, and we've evolved with that product set to ensure that our clients remain safe.
Do you still have the vans?
We do have one van.
Love it.
Well, thanks very much for that. I think it's been a really useful discussion. I guess the key takeaways for me are that the cyber threat landscape and cyber threats generally can be aimed at any size business now, not just the larger businesses. I think it's really useful to understand the impact it has on professional services firms and legal firms in general, and the impact that can have. And I guess it's the importance to partner with the right people in terms of being proactive about cyber security, having the right cyber products up their sleeve to manage people's networks and to keep them safe and secure. So thank you very much, and
thank you.
I hope to see you again on the second Medhurst podcast.
Let's do it.
Can't wait.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.